It's unimpeachable. My new book.
So what?
Yeah, just came out. Yeah, it just came out.
What's it on Amazon?
I'll say it'll be out in a week on Amazon.
Congratulations.
He's back. I didn't think he'd be here. Hi, good morning. Good morning. I didn't think you'd be here today.
I just said the same thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah? Come back. All right. Don't forget us. Yeah? Good. Don't let him punch you out. He's a great guy.
I was teasing.
No, he's a
great guy.
he's a wonderful guy.
Passionate, right?
Hi, good morning, guys. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. You'll look, you'll see. Okay. Good morning, Michael. Good morning. All right. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat shalom. Lovely to see you all. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for tearing yourselves away from the impeachment hearings to come to shul. It's quite remarkable. Remarkable moment in American history. Okay, good morning. Good morning. A couple of things going on. This morning in the shul we have wonderful scholars in residence. Herschel is putting on one of his wonderful weekends. And cantors Jackie or Jacob Mendelson and his son Danny Mendelson are here with us. They gave a wonderful concert last night. And this morning they're going to lead us in prayer. So if you'd like to hear some beautiful new music. And then following that we have lunch. And after lunch we'll gather back here for a conversation with the cantors Mendelson. Really very special. Jackie's one of the great, not just cantors, but teachers of cantors in the country. And Danny is a young cantor with a beautiful, beautiful voice. So please come join us for prayer and then join us afterwards for the conversation. This coming week, Monday night, we're joining with UCLA. Actually, we're hosting a program from the UCLA's Israel Center. The new director, UCLA has hired a new professor as the leader of the Israel Center, the Nazarian Israel Center. Professor Dov Waxman is a political scientist. He's British. Very, very solid scholar. He'll be here Monday night interviewing Jody Rudorin, who was the New York Times correspondent in Jerusalem for many years and has come back to the States to become the editor of The Forward. And they'll be having a conversation Monday night. It's free. Please come join.
What time?
I think it's at 7:30, but I check at 7:30. I think it's 7:30. Yeah? 7:30? Okay, good. Wednesday night, we continue with College of Jewish Studies. We're going to go back to our regular scheduled program. College of Jewish Studies this year is talking about the great debates, the controversies that have shaped Judaism. And our guest will be Professor Joshua Hollow, who is the Dean of Academics at HUC. And he'll be talking about mysticism, the great argument about whether mysticism has a role in Jewish life. He'll be with us. He's a terrific teacher. And then what's on the schedule, Sandy, for next? Yeah, okay. Well, that's what's going on next week. Two other personal notes. A very sad note for the community that our dear friend Mickey Wapner passed away this week. Mickey was 94, went into the hospital for some pretty routine surgery. There were many complications and she didn't come home. So her service, the funeral service for Mrs. Wapner will be tomorrow at 12:30 at Mount Sinai at Tanakh Chapel, Mount Sinai on Hollywood. If you'd like to come, the family would be glad to see you. And then they'll be doing Shiva at her home. She lived in Century City. They'll be doing Shiva in her home every night this week, Sunday night will be at 5 o'clock, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6, if anybody would like to come and to remember Mrs. Wapner. All right, and we share with her family our condolences. Really a very special soul. And then finally, on a note of shameless self-promotion, my new book just came out, okay? This is In Pursuit of Godliness. It's the biography, the life and thought of Rabbi Harold Schulweis. So as you know, some years ago I went back to JTS, my seminary, to finish my doctoral degree. The doctoral degree I began in 1979 and never finished. And they allowed me to finish it. And the bulk of the degree, the bulk of the dissertation was was a historical and philosophical biography of Rabbi Schulweis. And with the publisher, I've taken out all the boring technical stuff. And if you'd like to know who Harold was and what made him extraordinary and what his contribution to the Jewish world, the book's out. It'll soon be a movie. Brad Pitt will play me. Sorry? It is on Amazon, yeah. I think
the audiobook read by the author.
that hasn't been recorded yet. As soon as they tell me to come record it, I will. Hopefully, maybe we'll see.
Maybe you'll have an evening.
Yeah, we'll do some kind of an evening where I'll come and answer questions. But I hope it's readable, that I can tell you, because I worked very hard on making it readable. It's not technical. And those of you who knew Rabbi Schulweis and would like to revisit some of the moments of his career, moments you remember, and those of you who don't know him want to know who this great rabbi and great figure in 20th century American Judaism was, this is your chance.
What's the name again?
It's called In Pursuit of Godliness. If you go online and type my name into Google, you get past all the criminal convictions. It says, or Amazon, All right, and it'll be Amazon, I think, is releasing it on February 4th, but the publisher just sent me the copy. So if you'd like to read them, and we'll do a night where we talk about that, okay? That's enough about it. Yes, not on Shabbos, but any other time. Not yet. We'll have to figure that one out. We used to have a gift shop, so now we don't. So, you'll have to
The best thing Harold ever did was hire you.
Oh, thank you. That was very sweet. And there's some mornings he would agree with that, and there's some mornings he would look at me. He would look at me and go, "What are you talking about?" All right. Yes, please, Sherry.
I just want to say that after on my way with Mickey every Shabbos,
Yeah.
Mickey would say the same thing to me on the way there. This is the highlight of my week is going to hear Rabbi Feinstein. And on the way back, she would be like, he's that good. He's that good. So
Poor Mickey.
Yeah.
Mickey, she was a very, very sweet person. She's well known in the world because she was Joe Wapner's wife, and Wapner became the celebrity when he became the People's Court judge. But she was actually a very formidable person in her own. She was very politically active. So,
one of the first women that went to UT Austin.
yeah, she grew up in Mercedes, Texas, which is a small town in the Rio Grande Valley, which is that place where all the refugee issues are happening now. Went to University of Texas, and came to California and met Judge Wapner, and they began a life together. And she was very active in California Democratic politics. Yeah. 30 years ago, she had a humongous heart attack and died. I mean, literally died. She had heart surgery, and during recovery, her heart stopped. And a young resident stood over her, pumping her heart for 1 hour, as his professor kept saying, "Kid, the lady's dead," and kept her alive. And she came back, and she came back. So the family has this marvelous sense that the last 30 years have all been a gift. And 30 years meant that her kids got married and began lives together, and she saw grandchildren, and she saw great-grandchildren, and all of this has been a tremendous gift. And she wrote a wonderful book about women's heart disease, which is the second or third most common cause of death for American women, and warned women about taking care of themselves. Anyway, it's a fascinating story. She's a wonderful, wonderful soul. We remember her with great love. We've begun a new book of the Bible. So if you happen to have a Chumash, we'll start with Shemot on page 317, and eventually get to today's portion, which is on 351. Good. Is it freezing yet? No. Okay. Tell me when it gets really cold. Then I'll fix we will have the traditional playing with the thermostat. Good. Good. Come get a Chumash. We have enough Chumashim. Everybody can share. 317. Parsha Shemot. Okay. So if you watch college football, I happen to like college football. If you watch college football and there's a particularly tough game and one team wins, the interviewer goes to the team's coach afterwards and said, "Coach, your quarterback was really a star today. Your defensive line was impenetrable. It seems like your game plan really worked. And the coach's answer, especially this one particular one that I happen to enjoy, he says, first, all glory to God. Because God is really the reason. Now I'll tell you about my defense, you know. I like that. I find that very adorable.
Good.
You know?
Good. I do too.
No, because first of all, there's a certain humility to that, right? Yeah, I drew up a game plan. Yeah, I recruited these players. Yeah, but you know, it's not entirely me. All glory to God. Here's the interesting thing about. And then you could make fun of it if you want, you know. And if you lost, you know, would he have blamed God? You know, Coach, what happened today? Well, God failed us, right? You know, God had a lousy game plan. You know. God dropped that pass in the fourth quarter. God missed that call in the fourth quarter. Here's the thing. For certain great thinkers, Maimonides, for example, belief in God is an intellectual postulate. Belief in God is an intellectual principle. For Maimonides, he couldn't conceive that anything in the world would be if it wasn't for God, if it wasn't for a first cause and a ground of being. That's how the Rambam, that's how Maimonides understood the idea of God as creator.
What's wrong with that?
No, nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing.
Good.
Calm down. Nice sweater, by the way. Tell Betty she did a good job. Right? God knows, yes, that's true. I'm going to have to call him up just to hear the, you know. For certain kinds of intellectual religious life, God as a postulate makes sense. But for many religious people, there's something more to one's faith, belief, relationship with the divine, with God. There's an experience. People have experiences, and in those experiences, they find the presence of God. They find divinity. And the question is, what experiences, and what do you learn about God through those experiences? What is the nature of divinity? Or which experiences do you attribute God to, and which experiences are not in that realm of godly? You see? So one of the ways to read Torah is to read this as a catalog of experiences of different individuals in different moments of history and different generations, and the experiences that they associate with God. And in the very beginning, we have creation, and we have the creation of human beings, the creation of man, the creation of woman. So one might say that for a certain religious personality, the connection between man and woman, the connection between two loving friends, is the place in which they find God. And then you turn the page to the story of Noah, and you get something very different. Here you have God as destroyer. God as destroyer. And the idea that this ferocious destruction of everything that's alive, with the exception of just Noah in a boat, you know, in an ark, that's a different idea of God. And then you have the patriarch stories, right? And in the patriarch stories, you know, God shows up at different moments and speaks to them and indicates to them the direction of their lives. So you find God in these moments. Jack Miles is a scholar of religion. He's used to be a book reviewer for the LA Times, and he wrote God a biography. And I've been reading it over again because I'm interviewing him on Tuesday night. I haven't read it in a long time. And what he does is he sort of charts the different gods that are some personalities of God that you find. It is chilly, isn't it? Baruch Shechianu v'kiyamanu. With Takei Natka thermostat. Mine. Well, if you tell me you're cold, I'll fix it. I mean, that's what I'm here for, you know. Why else would I have gone to rabbinical school? But to fix thermostats, you know. So you know, Miles gives us a different he sort of sketches the personality, all these personalities of God. When Abraham needs a wife for his son, he sends the servant off to Aram Naharaim, back to Mesopotamia, to find a wife for his son. And the servant says, how am I going to know who's the right girl? And Abraham says, God will find the right girl for you. God is Shadchan, you know. God is matchmaker. God protects Jacob. Right? God, or at least God speaks to Jacob in certain moments. Here's what's interesting about the book of Genesis, which we've now finished and we're moving on. That it seems to be that God is slowly withdrawing from direct connection to the world. So you start out with as God was all the world. I mean, that's what Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis, it's all God. God is very much active in the world through the Noah story. With Abraham, and then with Isaac, and with Jacob, God is withdrawing. God speaks to each of them a little bit less, right? Speaks to Abraham numbers of times. Speaks to Isaac just once or twice. Speaks to Jacob only 3 times, four times in the course of his life. By the time we get to Joseph, God doesn't speak to Joseph. God doesn't seem to be involved in Joseph's life in the same direct way that God is involved in Abraham's life, right? Joseph interprets dreams and he attributes that to something godly. It's God's wisdom that enables him to interpret dreams. And then he does this wonderful thing, which we've noted before. At the end of his life, he looks back at the course of his life, and he can interpret the events of his life the way that you might interpret a dream. He connects the dots. He sees that there is a pattern to his life, that it wasn't random. And then when his brothers come to him, and they're terribly guilty about what they did, he says to him, don't worry. You intended it for evil, God intended it for good. So we have there a fully blown theory of history in which you can look at the events of history, but you have to look backwards at the events of history, and you can find the pattern. We called it beshert, right? You can find the pattern of divine intervention in your life, and even events that might be evil on the surface or evil at the moment turn out to be part of this larger plan. And that's Joseph's notion of history. But God doesn't ever speak to Joseph. God doesn't intervene in Joseph's life the way God intervened in Abraham's life or Isaac's or even Jacob's. God doesn't intervene in Joseph's life. God is sort of in the background. You have a sense of God as the force shaping the experience of history. And you have to use human imagination to sort of see that, but it takes an extraordinary spirit to sort of see that. Everybody got that? That's the God we meet at the very end of Genesis. So you start out with it's all God, and you end up with a God who's sort of taken a step back and let human beings play on the stage of history, although God is directing very subtly. Right? So the question we would stop and ask now, from a religious standpoint, is that when you think about God in your own life, is it more like the Abraham story? God wake you up in the morning and tell you where God wants you in the world? Or is it more like the Joseph story, where things happen to us, we make decisions, we struggle with the day-to-day crises and opportunities of life, and at the end of some time you look back and you say, that's why that happened. That's where it went. That's how I got here. Do you see the difference between those? Yeah. And sometimes you experience God as this powerful redeemer, and sometimes you experience God as a very cruel destroyer. And these are the different gods that you experience in the course of the book of Genesis. And the question being asked to a religious person is, okay, in your experience, right? We've read the book of Genesis. Tell me the book of Doug or the book of Shirley or the book of Dove. What is God? Where is God in that book? Now, when we turn to Exodus, 2 things are going to change. The first thing that's going to change is we're no longer talking about the family, the mishpacha. We're now going to talk about something, Am B'nai Yisrael, the people of Israel as an Am, as a nation. But the more important change is the change in God. So let's look at both of those together. Page 317, okay? Everybody okay so far? It's about to get really warm in this room. I want to warn you. Okay, tell me, is it too warm already? Yes. Okay, so you see, Shechianu, V'kiyamanu, V'kiyanu, Lazman, Hazeh, Umain. I'll go one more down. Let's see if that works. I don't know. I'm so glad I don't take showers with you guys. I never turn the water off. Yes. Douglas is coming with the microphone so that the whole world can hear this. Because you're on. Oh, God is right.
So when you talk about God or two gods, are you talking about two different personalities?
I
of
think that's a
God?
great question. So in Miles' book, which I recommend, it's a very lovely book, a very interesting book, put it that way. He says, look, you have these different personalities. And then he's talking about how those personalities are brought together into the character. He's talking about God as a literary character. Different personalities brought together. But at different moments, you glimpse God differently. What I said was something slightly different. I said, different religious people have different moments when they find God in their lives. And those moments tell us who God is. Right? So, you know, we've all had moments of being saved. Right? Even small things. You know, you're on the freeway and there's a red light in your rearview mirror. And you check the speedometer, you signal, you pull over to the right, and an ambulance drives by you. And you say, oh, thank God. I didn't need a ticket, right? That's a silly one. And they're bigger ones, of course. So that's a God who redeems me, God who saves me. And there are people who really believe in a God who's watching out for me and saving me. But then we have other moments, right? We lost a friend this week in something that shouldn't have happened or we didn't expect it. And you say sometimes God can be cruel. I mean, you see these different moments when you say, well, where do I find God, and what does this moment tell me about God? Okay. Now we're moderns. If we weren't so modern, we would have a more immediate sense of this. As modern people, we typically don't talk about that stuff. We typically assign material causes to things. Our friends, you know, went into the hospital and medical conditions militated and her body failed. So we look at these not as divine decrees, but as material kinds of experiences. But upon reflection, many of us, even though we're very modern and very scientific and very rational, in moments of reflection say, something's going on here. I have a sensation, an intuition that something is going on. I think that's what the Joseph stories are about. I think Joseph gets this intuition that there's something working in his life beyond simply the events. And he looks back at his life and he sees this pattern, and the pattern tells him who God is. You see? And that's sort of how the Joseph story ends. Does that make some sense? Okay. All right. So, anyone else? That was yes, please. Please, Farzan.
So I think God is all of the above. And
Okay.
depending, just like you said, on our mood, our experience, we see God differently.
Yeah.
Now, when we speak of God in different scenarios in Torah,
Right.
is it because God is evolving, or is it because the people are evolving and seeing God differently?
So that's a lovely question. That's such a lovely, deep question. So it depends on how you choose to read Torah, right? My traditional relatives would read Torah as God's self-revelation. And God is evolving through Torah. My suggestion to you was that what we have here is an anthology, a collection of people's perceptions of life and their notions of where God is in their lives, and they're sharing that with us. And that's what Torah is. It's our different perceptions. It depends on different individual personalities and individual experiences, and it depends on historical moments. At different historical moments, you have different sensations of how history is working. Right? We've looked at Jewish history. You can look at Jewish history that way, look at American history that way. You wonder, haven't you spent this whole week wondering, what will the textbooks say about this 50 years from now? Right? I really wonder. I would love, what would you love? 100 years from now, and assuming there is any America left and someone wants to learn American history, what will American history textbooks say about, January 2020? I think it's going to be fast. I'd love to know how this fits into a bigger pattern, what patterns people find in these events. Or will these events be deemed trivial because other events will happen? Can anybody remember the biggest news story on 9/10? We all know what happened on 9/11. What was the front page of the newspaper on 9/10? Whatever it was, nobody cares anymore because 9/11 has eclipsed it. It's entirely possible that everything we're experiencing now will be eclipsed by something else. I mean, you all know that Abraham Lincoln was the great president of the... Who was the president just before Lincoln?
James Buchanan.
Yeah, and tell me 3 things James Buchanan did.
He was a bachelor.
Well, yes, thank you.
He was probably gay, and he was pretty corrupt and ineffective.
No, I mean, you see, but see, certain events have a way of creating highs and lows and perspectives. So what you have here is people are looking at at different historical eras, give us different images of what matters and where we find God in those moments. Yes, please.
Okay. Monday is the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
Good.
And whatever you say about God has to be tempered by the fact that Monday is the 75th anniversary of
Right, which makes it incredibly difficult to speak about any kind of God involved in history, because it raises that question, which is so terribly difficult and painful. And yet, people still do. That's what's so interesting. People still, we still do. We still have an impulse to find some kind of plan, some kind of pattern, some kind of divine will in the course of our events. Michael.
It seems to me that after reading a lot of what Rabbi Sholoi said in his books, the books that I understood, and then talking with him when we were working together on some projects,
Yeah.
and then my own observations, that the human animal has difficulty reconciling randomness
Yeah.
with order.
Yes.
And we're always reaching out. We see around us chaos, which creates anxiety.
Right.
Therefore, we have to create cosmos out of chaos.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that gives us a sense, oh, that's why it's going on. When we don't realize that that isn't really what's going on.
Right.
The stars are not a pattern in the zodiac. The stars that we see in the sky are randomly out there. They're revolving around different bodies, et cetera, in terms of just the way things are.
Yeah.
And we need that kind of order, and this provides the order. And as you said, in retrospect,
Yeah.
we create the order that perhaps really isn't there, but which satisfies that inner need.
Okay, so did everybody hear what Michael said? So we human beings are allergic to chaos. We find order and patterns in things. It's the way our brains are structured. If I gave you 10 random numbers to remember, you wouldn't be able to remember them. But if they turn into a phone number, 818-788-6000, it's not hard to remember. We create order out of chaos, and that enables us to hold on to facts and to understand them, and it gives us a sense of comfort and control and predictability. Okay? That's how human beings are. So when we face the events of life, we do the same thing. We try to find patterns among those events. Okay? That notion of patterning events and then assigning it to something bigger than ourselves. The other fact is we were all raised by parents who were much bigger than us and took care of us, most of us, when we were young. And so we like to project that into the world and imagine that the patterns aren't random, but they're the product of our Father who art in heaven. With some sort of sense that of Joseph, who says, you meant it for evil, but God tried to save life. And that's the bigger pattern. Those are the patterns that we find. But the question here is twofold. Number one, are the patterns really there, or did we just invent them? That's question number one. And question number two is, what difference does it make if I choose to see this pattern or that pattern? Right? Different patterns yield different ethics, different ways of living life, different conclusions about life, right? And that becomes a more humanistic question of what gives me the strength to live my life. Yes, please.
When we face a problem,
It's okay.
usually there are two alternatives.
Yeah.
The smart one find the alternative that is not known,
Yeah.
but is not obvious.
Okay.
I think in regarding of God, it is not only this one or that one. Sometimes God decides not to intervene.
Yeah.
That is from Auschwitz, God decided not to intervene.
Yeah.
It is not that he did or he didn't do it.
Yeah.
He did not do anything.
Okay.
That is the problem that we do not understand.
Yeah, right. I mean, if that's the way that you want to tell the story, that's one way to tell the story. There are many other ways to tell the story. Pop.
But you're forgetting the element of free will.
Yeah, okay.
And cause and effect. God may plan some things, but even take your outcomes.
Yeah.
There's a matter of free will in that.
Yeah.
And the repercussions of it.
So how do you reconcile, on the one hand, free will, and on the other hand, this sense of my experience follows a certain pattern? That's one of the great philosophical and moral questions, you see. Take a look in the text with me, 3:17. Ve'elis shmot b'nei Yisrael. These are the names of b'nei Yisrael. At this point, b'nei Yisrael are literally the children of Jacob. We started out as a family. We started out as a family, and it's this family that we're connected to each other. And now that went down to Egypt. We all went down to Egypt together as a family. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehudi, Yisachar, Zvulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All together, 70. A small group. Right? A medium-sized Valley Beth Shalom bar mitzvah. Okay? Joseph had died, and all the brothers in that generation. That's the end of the family. Now what happens? Well, now we have a pattern of events, and the Bible is clearly telling you that there's a God behind these events. And the reason you know there's a God behind the events is, number one, because they're extraordinary events, and number two, because the language here, the Hebrew, is going to mimic the Hebrew of Genesis. Okay? I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased greatly, so the land was filled with them. The Hebrew is, U'bnei Yisrael paru v'yishritzu v'yirbu v'yatzmu b'ma'od ma'od v'tamalei ha'aretz otam. When Adam is created, God tells him, Pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the world. So this is creation language. This is the Bible's wink at you, a linguistic wink, saying, you know what really is going on here. You really know what's going on here, right? Right. This is divine increase. And now we begin the drama of the history. A new king arose over Egypt, didn't know Yosef. He didn't know the backstory. I mean, there's politics for this, or he didn't want to know. And he said to his people, look, the Israelite people are too numerous for us. Let's be wise about this. And the funny thing is, every move he's going to make is the wrong move. He says, let's be wise, but every move is the wrong move. Otherwise, in the event of war, they'll join our enemies. So they set taskmasters. And the more they worked them, the more they had more kids. You Jews are stubborn. Woo. But that's because this isn't normal population increase. This is God-driven population increase. This is uncanny, unnatural. And the Egyptians ruthlessly imposed labors upon them. It's the Pesach story. And now he tries, so the first attempt to limit Israelite fertility was enslavement. Didn't work. The second attempt, he goes to these two women, Shifra and Puah, the two midwives. And he says to them, if it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. But Shifra and Puah disobey. First case of civil disobedience recorded in human history. And when Pharaoh calls them back into court and says, what the hell are you doing? I told you to kill these kids. They very cleverly repeat his propaganda back to him. Oh my God, Pharaoh, these Hebrew women are not normal. They're like beasts. Before we show up, they've had a whole litter of kids. Nothing we can do. Pharaoh can't contradict his own propaganda. And so he abandons this move, and the Bible just notes that these two women became prolific themselves, which means the world is filled with moral heroes. Go find them. And then finally, enslavement doesn't work, limited genocide doesn't work, a more general genocide. Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every boy that is born you shall throw into the Nile, let every girl live. So horror. You have a contest now between God's plan and Pharaoh's horror. And if you follow Joseph's rubric, you meant it for evil, God meant it for good, you're asking yourself at this point, how's this going to turn out well? Do you see that? How is this going to turn out well? Which is a question that people are going to ask in every moment of history when they face oppression. How is this possibly going to turn out well? In what way can I imagine this to be a prelude to redemption? How is this destruction a prelude to redemption? If sending Joseph into Egypt to become a slave was the prelude to the redemption of the world, how can becoming slaves here in Egypt become the prelude to redemption? That's the question you're always asking, right? Now, the perspective shifts. And the perspective shifts from nations to one person, to one family, to one person. Because the Bible wants you to know that this process doesn't work just on the mass scale, it also works on an individual scale. We're going to follow one person. One person, right? What happens? A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a woman from the house of Levi. Mazel tov. A Jewish boy committed, right? That was a joke. The woman conceived and she bore a son, which under normal circumstances would be a simcha, right? That's something good, right? But what's going on all around them? They're throwing sons into the Nile. And that leaves this family with a horrifying choice. What do you do? When she saw how beautiful he was, now here again, the Bible is using Genesis language to wink at you. Because it doesn't say in Hebrew how beautiful. Look, first of all, she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him. If he was a miskite, she would have turned him over to Pharaoh's police. You know, here I got an ugly baby for you. Really? Have you ever met a mother who didn't think that this was the most beautiful baby ever? The most beautiful baby, look at him. Right? Come on. How beautiful he was. The Hebrew is Vatere oto ki tov hu. Ki tov hu is not what a beautiful Gerber baby box baby he is, with apologies, right? Right? The Gerbers are here, right? You have baby Gerber box babies, right? The Ki tov hu comes from Vayar Elohim Ki tov. This kid has something cosmic in him. So she decides she's going to hide him. Hard to hide a baby. Hard to hide a baby from two things. One, hard to hide a baby from the Gestapo. Pharaoh's going around looking for babies, right? People are giving away babies. People are betraying children in the neighborhood. I think the other thing is it's hard to hide from your nightmares. Imagine that poor woman's nightmares. You know, every night she goes to sleep with the baby at her breast, and she has this nightmare that Pharaoh's police bash down the door, grab the baby, destroy him. I mean, she can't live with it. 3 months go by, she can't live with it. She's gonna give him up to chance. Throw him in the Nile. Now, again, there's a kunz here. There's a game here. Okay? If I were to tell you that his name is Luke Skywalker, she named him Luke and put him on Tatooine, a desert planet far away from the center of the galaxy, to be raised by his far uncle and aunt, you would go, oh, I know what you're talking about. There was a great myth called the myth of Isis. And what's the myth of Isis? Isis was born of the Nile. He was floating down the Nile, and he was found by the princess. They're playing on a very popular myth, right? So what happens is she makes him a little boat. The Hebrew for the boat is teva. The only other place in the Bible that word is used is with Noah's Ark, teva. She puts him in the boat, she floats him down the Nile, and ironically, who finds him? The daughter of Pharaoh, the princess. The same guy who is promulgating the decree of genocide, it's his kid who rescues the baby. And in case you think, oh, well, she doesn't know he's Hebrew, right? He has a little Jewish star around his neck. He has a Bloomingdale's blanket, you know. He has one of those very expensive teddy bears. She picks him, and what? He's wearing Levi's, right, because he's a Levite, right. And she says, Nocha, Jewish baby, you know, Mazel Tov, right? I mean, but you get this sense, where's God in all of this? Where's God in all of this? There's no decrees, there's no voice from heaven, there's no lightning bolts. Where is God? You say, well, obviously God is involved in this. How else could any of this stuff be happening? I mean, so here again, it's the Joseph story. If you can connect the dots, you can find divinity. So she raises him. And he grows up. And then the story of his growing up on page 323. It's verse 11 of chapter 2. Sometime after that. Whenever the Bible wants to tell you something momentous, it says sometime after that. Vayhi achar devarim ha'ele, right? Vayhi bayamim. Moses grows up and he goes out. And it says, it's a beautiful text because it's very ambiguous. He goes out el echav. Now the question is, who are his echav? Who are his brethren? Who is his kin? He has two identities. He is the prince of Egypt and he is the child of slaves. And the question is, when he goes out, who does he think he is? Who does he imagine he is? The man has a choice. Who would you rather be? Would you rather be a hammer or a nail? Would you rather be the prince of the free or the child of the enslaved? Who would you rather be? Vayar b'sivlotam. And frankly, that's also ambiguous, because sivlotam can either mean their suffering or it could mean their burdens, their work. He's watching Egypt grow. And the question is, who does he identify with? The powerful or the powerless? And you still don't know. And the question, again, where is God's hand in the development of this man's identity? Vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'achav. And there too it's identity. He sees ish mitzri, an Egyptian man, beating ish ivri. And it says me'achav, an Egyptian man beating a Hebrew man, one of his brethren. Which one? When Moses sees that scene, which one does he identify with? Does he see his fellow Egyptian trying to get those Hebrew slaves are so difficult. Boy, they just never do what you tell them to do. If you don't hit a few of them, does he see it or does he see that as his brother being beaten to death? Or does he see it from another standpoint, because the word ish is repeated twice? Does he simply see it as a human being? And he sees two human beings engaged in a transaction in which one is having the life beat out of him by the other. And it doesn't matter which one he identifies with. The fact is that this moment of murder, this moment of destruction, just so enrages him. I'll be right with you. And then it says he looks around. He doesn't see if anybody else notices this. But nobody notices it. Why does nobody notice it? Because it's normal. Because it's normal. It's what happens, you know. There's a guy who lives under the bridge right over here on Sepulveda. It's normal. We got used to it. It's normal, right? It's normal. We got 700 families come take food from our food bank every month. It's normal. It's normal. We don't see them, right? It's just normal. It's just urban evil. It's just normal urban evil. It's worse than Detroit. It's better here than Newark, you know. It's normal. And no one responds. And now he knows something is called upon him to do. But he's never acted in the world. If you've never taken action in the world, if you've never had any action that wasn't prescripted, the question is, what is he going to do? What is he going to do? So what does he decide to do? Now, Moses has a learning disability. Anybody here have a kid with a learning disability? I have a kid with a learning disability. What's Moses' learning disability? When he becomes... No. Stuttering would be okay. Stuttering, you know, Joe Biden, Sully Berger, you know, these guys... This is worse. This is deeper. When he becomes excited, enraged, he loses the power of words, and he tends to hit things. I don't know if you know anybody like this. This is his learning disability. He could order the guy to stop. He's the prince of Egypt, for God's sakes. But instead, he rises up and he kills the guy. And then the next day, he meets two Israelites and they're fighting, and it turns out this is known. So he takes off and he's scared of Pharaoh's retribution, so he takes off for the desert, and he goes and he hides among the Midianites. Is God in this story? Has the name of God been mentioned any place in this story? Can you find God in this story? If you take the Joseph model, God is in the story. But that's about to change. Okay, somebody had a question over here, please. Yes.
I just have a comment. It seems like we don't know if Moses really knew he was one of the Israelite or he was whatever, an Egyptian. And it seems also that in the paragraph, and he went out to his brothers, that the author of the book is writing that. It's not like Moses really thought it was they were his brothers.
No, this is narrative. This is storytelling, right?
We don't know.
But the storytelling is suspenseful because you don't know who his brothers are, who he sees his brothers are. You don't know what he sees. It could be either way.
Yeah.
It's open enough that it could go either way. I suspect that that's what was in front of him. I suspect that he had to make a choice. Did you ever have to make a choice whose side you were on? Did you ever have to make a choice? I mean, it becomes a really interesting choice. You know, there's a Union song, "Which side are you on, boy?" You know, there's some times in life when you have to make a choice. Who am I? Who are my people? What is called upon me to do? What's the right thing to do? Right? It's a very, sorry? You know, you people keep dragging me into politics, and I'm trying so hard to keep on the Bible and not make reference to anything that might be in any way relevant to the world. So, yes, please. Wait, you're about to be famous. Well, you're famous already.
Okay.
So.
This assumes that the princess and the Egyptians somehow communicated to him all his life that he had this dual identity, or somehow he knew.
Well, the Bible hints at that too, because his mother nursed him. And in those days, mothers nursed kids a long time. Remember the movie The Last Emperor? There's this wonderful movie, The Last Emperor, and the kid is nursed till he's 9. Every woman in the room goes, you know. All right, so they nursed him. So he was nursed by his birth mother, but raised by his adopted mother. Right? And by the way, the name Moshe, she gives it a Hebrew derivation in the Bible. Ki min hamayim mishitihu. From the water I brought him up. But the name Moshe is Egyptian. Masas is actually only a half a name. You add the name of a god before it. Masas means son of. So if you're a son of Ra, the sun god, you are Ra Masas, or Ramses. Right? Masas means sonny boy, you know, junior. Masas is a good Egyptian name. Okay, so he has a good Egyptian name. And you don't know which of his two mothers predominates in his identity. He has two identities. He has two fathers. He has two mothers. He has two families. He has two destinies. I think that the movie Prince of Egypt did a nice job of this, right? That when Katzenberg made that movie, by the way, the whole movie if you want to see the movie Prince of Egypt, it's an animated movie, but it's actually very well done, right? It's on page 323. You see the white space between "I drew him out of the water" and the next sentence sometime after that? That's where the whole movie fits. Jeffrey Katzenberg owns that white space. Don't write in it. He licensed it. Because the whole childhood of Moses is that we don't know. We don't know anything about the childhood, the raising, because the Bible specifically wants to leave his identity a question mark.
Yeah, in the movie, they used one of my stories.
Did they really?
Yeah, to figure out how he knew he was Jewish.
Yeah.
In one of my children's midrashim, he didn't know that he was Jewish, but his mother would sing songs to him.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And so one day he's walking outside into town,
yeah,
and he hears the songs. And it's the songs that bring him back. So they took my story and they used it.
Beautiful.
No, they didn't acknowledge it or pay me. And they said, if you come here, we'll call the police. Which is the right way to treat me, Jenna.
Oh, no. Yeah, please.
Although not stated in the Bible, would his having been circumcised be a way that he was identified as a Jew early on, but nevertheless raised by the
Great.
Egyptians were circumcised.
Not all Egyptians, just the upper classes and the priests. The priests of Egypt were
So
circumcised.
he would have been circumcised along with his class.
He would have been circumcised along with his class. So that's one of the ways you might know that he was at least not a lower class Egyptian. He wasn't just a schlepper. I mean, he was right? That plus the Beverly Hills blanket, I'm telling you, right?
It was.
Yeah.
Richard Elliott Friedman uses that as a historical basis for the legitimacy of some form of the Exodus to say that circumcision was not originally a Hebrew custom, but was an Egyptian custom.
Yeah, it's a custom in many cultures around the world. I mean, and it's obvious why it's that custom. All right, ready? Buckle your seatbelt. The story's about to change. We've talked about the first change in the story, which is we're no longer a family. It's now Am B'nai Yisrael. It's a nation. And the negotiation is no longer between the family and local tribes. It's now between the nation of Israel and the most powerful nation in the earth, which is Egypt. This is a story of a clash of power. But now one more element is about to add to the story. Chapter 3, page 326. Moses tending the flock of... Again, there's a big white space. You see the white space? 40 years go by. 40 years go by. What happens in those 40 years? Where is Moses living? In Midian. What is Midian? It's the desert. They're a nomadic tribe. He's married. He has kids, maybe grandkids. Sends them to school. Has a nice television set. Looking forward to the Super Bowl. Right? All of a sudden, now Moses tending the flock. You see now? The word now doesn't occur in Hebrew. It's just and. It's a connection, not a separation. Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, drove the flock in the wilderness, came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Did anybody know there was a mountain of God? Did you know there was a mountain? I didn't know there was apparently there's a mountain of God. Who's God? Right? Har HaElohim. It's so that, technically that wouldn't be a mountain of God. It would be a mountain of the gods. This is holy mountain. Right? The angel, and it's a holy mountain, but you can graze on it. I like that, right? It has parking, right? And an angel, you can use it for secular purposes. You can play handball, you know? An angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. Whew, when have we ever had that before? When Abraham talked to God, there were angels, but they just talked to God. There was no bush, right? Jacob had dreams. Joseph has dreams. Is Moses awake or asleep? He's awake. There's no dream here. This is happening to him. Out of a bush. He gazed, and the bush was aflame, and the bush was not consumed. Miracle bush. And Moses said, I have to look and see what this is. It doesn't burn up. And when God saw that he turned to look, Moses called to him from the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. Has Moses ever talked to God before? When was the last time anybody in the Bible talked to God?
Abraham, right?
Jacob. Jacob talked to God when he went down to Egypt. Jacob talked to God. But Moses, so it's been some generations before. God hasn't shown up in the story in some generations. And suddenly he shows up and he says, Moshe, Moshe. Right?
It just says Hineni.
And he says, Hineni, I'm here.
That's the key.
Well, how does he know it's God? How does he know what it is? Right? Do not come closer, remove your sandals from your feet. The place you stand is holy ground. And here's the sentence. Ready? Vayomer. The English is wrong. It's Vayomer. He said, Anochi Elohei Avicha, Elohei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, for Moses to understand that, this goes back to your question, for Moses to understand that sentence, what would he have had to know? That Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were his ancestors. He would have had to have some recollection, some knowledge. If he's just an Egyptian, then that's the first time he's ever heard these names. That means nothing to you. God knows that he knows who these people are. And he's speaking to him in the language of his people. I'm the God of your fathers. Remember, he's an adult. It's a long time. And who his father is a great question. And Moses hid his face. He hid his face. Why is he hiding his face? Think of it. Why that response? What does that response say? Could be fear. I'm facing something I don't understand. What else could it be? Come on. Why is he hiding his face? Why wouldn't you want to step forward? God shows up in your linen closet and says to you, surely, lo, I am the Lord God from Akron, Ohio. You step forward and say, God, what can I do for you? Can I fix you some tea? Right? That's what Shirley would do. You know, Shirley would give God a hug, and God would say, thank you. I needed that. Now the world will get better. Right?
Serve him kugel, too.
You know, God says, Brian Neiman, I have work for you to do. You say, yo, God, I'm here, baby. You say what Dabo Sweeney says. All glory to God. That and a great defensive front. Right? Why does he hide his face? Come on. Give me an idea. Give me. What?
Well,
he's afraid. That's one answer. That's good.
He went to Midian to escape all of that.
Yeah.
So why step forward now? Hey, I went all the way here to escape all of this.
I don't want to be Jewish anymore.
Yeah.
I got burned last time. Why am I in Midian instead of in Egypt? Because the Jews betrayed me. I don't want that identity. Or I'm ashamed of that identity. Or I'm afraid that you're going to ask me to do something and I like my private life. Leave me alone. I don't want to get involved. Please.
Uncertainty or shame?
Uncertainty. Tell me about uncertainty.
He didn't want to know who he is.
Yeah, that's really it. He's running away from himself. He hid his face. From himself, he hides his face. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, there's several literary elements that we have to recognize.
Yeah.
The first one is in terms of recognition of who he is.
Right.
He didn't leave his real mother until it says when the child grew up.
Yeah.
So his formative years were with the Hebrew people, with his own people.
Okay.
Until he went to Egypt. So he knows who he is. He does know who he puts that aside because he has, he gets all the clothes, he gets the riches and everything else. Now he runs away because of what happened. And all of a sudden somebody says, Moses, Moses, or this voice comes out, or this angel, whatever it is, and all of a sudden he's been identified. And it's like, they're going to get me. They're going to get me.
Yeah.
And I got to get out of here, or I got to do something to
They called him out. He's in the closet. He just got called out of the closet.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And now, and the other part that's interesting is that initially when he sees the burning bush, I'm loud enough. He sees there's an angel in the bush. He sees the angel.
Right.
And then he turns away and says, oh my God, that's the most frightening thing I've ever seen. Who can believe that a body can exist within the fire and yet it exists?
Right. Right. And you see God, you die. That's part of it. Eli, we're going to say. That's what Joe.
He believes that if you see God, you'll die.
Right. That's pretty scary. Let's see what happens. Wait. The Lord continued. That's good. Vayomer. It's not the Lord continued. God said, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt and have heeded their outcry because of their taskmasters. I am mindful of their sufferings. I have come down. A raid in Hebrew. A raid means I have come down. Yored means to come down. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and bring them out of that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the region of the Canaanites and all the other guys. So the cry of the Israelites has reached me. I have seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. I will send you to Pharaoh, and you shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt. Woo! God starts out filling the story. And then God gets smaller, smaller, smaller until we get to Joseph when there's no God in the story except what you can see in the pattern of your own experiences. And that's the way Exodus begins. The pattern of experiences. Pharaoh's fear, the people's growth. Moses gets saved from the river. Moses goes through these events. And you still think God is somehow behind history. And all of a sudden, what happens? God shows up again in the story. You know that moment, it was like the third act of these movies where the hero shows, you think the hero's gone, and the hero shows up, right? The cavalry come. God is now going to be a direct player in history. This has never happened, by the way. Because up until now, God only worked through Abraham, through Isaac. God saved Abraham from the Pharaoh last time. But now God is going to become a direct player in the historical drama. What's that look like? What does that look like when God is a direct player in the historical drama? But the problem, the historical drama is now going to be made up of these 3 or 4 personae, right? It's going to be God against Pharaoh, and Moses is representing God, and the Hebrew people, the Israelites, are the sort of subject or the object of this whole contest. Now Moses can't believe this. And Moses goes through 5 different permutations where he says, nah. And the one thing he doesn't do, he doesn't walk away. I mean, he goes through 5 permutations. He first starts out by saying, me? Are you, who am I? I'm a shepherd. I'm a shepherd. Get out of my face. What? Well, then God says, no, you're going to go. And then he says something really interesting at the bottom of 329. I'll get you in Moses, Douglas. God, Moses, when I come to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers sent me, and they're going to say, what's his name? Now, that can mean 2 things. What's the code word? How do we know you're one of us? How do we know that you're not sent by the Pharaoh? Look, your name is Moses. You speak with an Egyptian accent. Last time we saw you, you were dressed like an Egyptian prince. How do we know you're not a spy? How do we know this is part of the oppression? How do we know you're not just part of some plot to destroy us? Give us the secret handshake. But he doesn't know the secret handshake, right? So, but there's something deeper than that. When you ask someone's name in the Bible, what are you asking for? The God of our fathers? We've been slaves for 4 generations. Tell us about the God of our fathers. What kind of God of our fathers? A God who's going to protect us? Where the hell's he been? Where the heck? What? Do you know what's happening to us? Do you know that our sons are being thrown into the Nile? Do you know that our elders are being crushed under these projects? Who is this God? You're going to save us? Who is this God? And now God gives them an answer. What's his name? Turn the page. 330. And it's a really satisfying answer. I'll show you how satisfying it is. Right? And God said to him, you see page 330? Look at the next phrase. Somebody read it. Now, when a translator gives you simply the transliteration of a foreign phrase without translating it, what is the translator telling you?
He doesn't know the meaning.
I have no idea what this is about. And if he doesn't, and if H.L. Ginsburg, who translated the Torah, doesn't know, how the heck is Moses supposed to know? Ehyeh. What is Ehyeh in Hebrew? I will be. Asher, that which I will be. What is this? What are you playing word games with me? What? Come on. Give me a name. Jupiter. Give me a name. Give me a name. Disney names gods. Why can't you? I mean, give me a name. I will be what I will be. What is God saying to him? What does that mean, right? You will say, Ehyeh sent me. I will be what I will be. What is he trying to say?
You can't use my name
Hang on.
magic.
Hang on. So I want to hear that. Give him the microphone. I'm sorry. You can't what?
You can't use my name for magic.
You can't use my name for magic. Why would you think this is magic? Why is this magic?
Well, if you know the name of a god, you invoke the god, and you get the power of the god. According to Latin, nomen est omen, the name is the potency.
Okay.
So by saying, I will be what I will be, means you're not knowing my name.
Okay, good. That's one possibility. Farzan, what is he trying to say? Why does God use this funny name instead of telling him a name?
If he gave himself a name, he would be limiting.
Yeah.
God,
So if
God
you give a
himself.
name, when you give a name, you become God of the, fill in the blank. And what is God telling you here? I'm not like gods, the gods of the pagans. I'm not a god of thunder, not the god of lightning, not the god of war, not the god of slaves, not the god of kings. What am I? The God of everything. I'm the God of being. Everything. You can't limit me. Don't ask me that question. That's the one question you won't be able to get an answer to. Listen, even today, what name do we use for God? Yud He Vav He, which we never pronounce. I mean, think about that for a minute. I mean, what kind of wacko religion do you have when you, in the name of God, you can't say? I mean, does that strike anybody as weird? That's like having a ball team, and the name of your ball team is "We Don't Have a Name." You put it on your uniforms. You're like the no-name ball team. What do you mean? The whole purpose of religion is to name God. Because the whole purpose of religion is to point to those experiences where God is available to you. But this God says, number one, you can't say my name. And I'll give you a bunch of acronyms, a bunch of funny, homonyms to use, but I'm not going to give you my name because I don't want you identifying with only one single circumstance. I don't want you using my name for magic. And I don't want you to think that you own me. I'll help you because I love your ancestors, but you don't own me. You don't control me. I don't belong to you. Right? The easiest thing would be, I'm the God of Israel. Israeliyah. I'm the God of Israel. God's on our side. Did you know that God's on our side, by the way? That whatever we do, God blesses because God's on our side? Right? God says, nonsense. I don't get belong. I mean, it's such an interesting, weird idea. Moses asks a simple question. What am I supposed to say to these people when they ask, who is this God who's liberating us? And his answer is, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Because you're dealing with something beyond what you categorize as divinity. Something bigger. Wait, we're not done yet. I've got one more step in this process. So let's get a couple of quick comments, and then I'm going to ask you quickly because I want to finish this. I want to get to today's Torah portion.
But what God did was he gave Moses and the people their future.
He gave them what?
Their future.
Meaning what?
I will be what I will be.
Yeah.
He's giving them a future.
It's tomorrow.
Not just the past.
It's a possibility. What I'm going to be is not what happened before, but what's about to happen. There's a God. You have a future, right? Now, what happens at the end? Oh, please go ahead. Take your comment. Yeah.
You need to define the attribute of the name exactly the way that it means.
Yeah, which is
I
what?
Will be. It means that on this every situation, I will be what I have to be.
Uh-huh.
Rabbi referred to magician.
Yeah.
And this is what God is referring to.
Yeah.
If you see that later on in each stages, God performs different magician, different magic, so he will be what he is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Please.
So it's very interesting. I'm listening to this in the context of the 75th anniversary of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Can we use this blueprint in a way to begin to understand where God was?
Yeah.
If we say that, the expansion and contraction of involvement.
Yeah. What do you think? Not just. Let's go one more step. It's a brutally difficult conversation to have, but let's not just the expansion and contraction of divine involvement in the world. Let's go one more step. Ehiyeh. You have a future. You know what's remarkable about this? We're here to commemorate that. Right? There is a midrash. There's a beautiful midrash. When we get to the end of the story, you know how the story ends because you've been through Pesach. We cross the Red Sea. And at the end of the Red Sea story, the Torah says, Vayaminu b'Adonai u'b'Moshe avdo. They believed in God and they trusted Moses. Right? So there's a midrash in the Gemara where one of the rabbis said, well, of course they believe in God, and of course they trust Moses. They just saw the Red Sea split. Anybody see the Red Sea split is going to become a believer. Right? And the answer to the midrash is exactly right. You spend 400 years in Egypt, you spend 200 years as a slave, you watch your kids be thrown into the Nile, you watch your parents smushed by the slavery, you watch enough brutality and evil and horror in the world. The miracle wasn't the splitting of the sea. The miracle was that they were willing to take one step forward. That they were willing to take one step because they still believed in the possibility of freedom, that slavery hadn't destroyed their not faith in God, but faith in a possible future. The idea that tomorrow might be different than yesterday. That's the greatest miracle of the Bible, said the Gemara. Well, it seems to me that if that's the greatest miracle of the Bible, the fact that Jews emerged from the Holocaust and said, we're not going to lie down and die, that the Jewish people decided not to lie down and die, is the greatest miracle in all of Jewish history. Because we should have done what Madeleine Albright's parents did. We all should have done that. What right do you have to raise children identified as Jews in a world that puts Jews into gas chambers? You have no right. It's only because you're a bunch of stubborn, stiff-necked, wacko people that you do this. That you believe in the institutions of Western democracy to protect your children? And Nazi Germany didn't convince you otherwise? I mean, to me, the fact that we're here is the miracle. You want to see God's, yeah, we will be. We're not done. Slavery isn't the last word of our existence, right? There is a tomorrow. It's a really tough question. And it's not just a question for us. I mean, I happen to be reading a lot about climate change and what's about to happen to us. And it's real easy to get discouraged. There's this book called The Uninhabitable Earth. If you haven't read it, it's worth reading, but I'll give you a warning. Halfway through the book, I'm not making this up, the author says, if you've gotten this far into the book, you're a really courageous reader. Because he's describing all the catastrophes that are coming, right? The idea, but here you get what does God say to him? Yeah, we're not done. There is a future. I will be with you, but more than, there is something coming. There's something coming. The idea that there's something coming changes the way that you orient yourself to the universe. It's a wonderful question. It's a wonderful question. Dr. Eli, Your Honor.
Okay, so one thing about going through this the way we do it, I now see the burning bush as a setup by God to bring Moses in.
Yeah.
If I had wandered by and saw the burning bush, he wouldn't have said, "You're going to free the people." It was Moses.
Well, there's again a lot of interesting midrash on that. What does a burning bush mean? And what does it mean that a bush is burning but it doesn't burn up? I mean, use that as an image for a moment, right? And what does it take? What kind of attention does it take? Okay? I want to read one more line of Torah, then I'll get your question. So now turn to today's Torah portion. 351. Right? Page 351. It's chapter, whatever it is, 6. God spoke to Moses. Vaydiber Adonai Moshe lemor. Vayomer. Vayomer elav. Ani Adonai. I am Adonai. I am, and here's this word you can't pronounce. I told you before I'm Ehiyeh. Now I'm going to tell you I'm even stronger than that. I'm Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. Right? I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but I did not make myself known to them by this name Adonai. Okay? What is he saying? He's saying, my relationship to your ancestors was such, but my relationship with you is going to be different. I am now going to reveal parts of me that nobody else ever saw. Now you're going to, stand back, kid. Now you'll see the real stuff. And what comes next is a fury. It's in some ways frightening as hell. I mean, you think about 10 plagues. I mean, we all make fun of the plagues because it's Seder, we dip out the wine, and we have plastic frogs on the table, and we sing the froggy song. And the 10 plagues literally undo creation. They destroy a civilization. That's the image. The fury, the power, the in some ways the cruelty is unimaginable. I don't know how many of you were awake at 11:24 the other night when we had a little Zetz? Were you awake when we had a little Zetz? Right? And I don't know how many of you lived here in 1994 when the little Zetz went on for 10 minutes. Right? I happened to live in here in 1994. It was Takei Natka, right? Have you ever been through an earthquake? There is a sense of utter, complete powerlessness. There's nothing to hold on to because everything is rolling and rocking, right? That sense of holy God, yes, thank you, I can't, there's nothing to hold on to because the whole world is dissolving in front of me. Imagine that 10 times over. That's the 10 plagues. God is about to unleash horror, just utter horror, against this society, against Egypt. And what we have here is a new experience of God. It's a new experience of God. Now, the last question we have to ask, and it's time to go, the last question is, okay, what are we being taught? If we connect the dots in our own experience, when have we ever experienced this? And what do we learn from this? And where do you find God in the course of your experiences? And which God do you find? Which God do you find? All right, Douglas, you get the last comment because I want to go down.
The last question. Moses as a leader, his first reaction to his calling is to say, "Who am I?"
Yeah.
It's humble.
Yeah.
Who else in Jewish history has ever said that, or who else, in any sort of political scene has a first reaction of humility? Isn't it, in order to assume the mantle of leadership, isn't egotism like you need to be thinking that why am I, why is it me?
I love that. That's beautiful.
No, it is humility.
No. It's both. It's all this. That's the wonderful thing about a text is that you have multiple personalities behind the text. So, for Douglas, it's humility. Okay? Humility is a very interesting thing when you think about it. Because humility is based on a deep sense of my security in myself. I'm secure enough in myself that I can be humble. Right? I don't have to advertise myself. I know who I am, and I'm comfortable in my world. Okay? That's one possibility. Brian's possibility is fear. Right? Egypt for Moses is what? It's the place he ran away from. It's horror. It's a place he doesn't want to go to. Let's take another one. What has he been doing all this time? Tending sheep. What's the difference between leading sheep and leading Jews?
The sheep argue back?
Bah! Lo ish devarim anochi. Could be I stutter, I have a speech impediment. I think it's much deeper than that. I'm not a man with anything to say in the world. I'm not a public man. I'm inside. What a shepherd does is go out. You were a shepherd for a while. You go out and you spend hours and hours and hours by yourself, just you and the sky and a sheep. I'm a man of internal life. I'm not a man externalized. You're turning me into a public figure? That's not me. I like being by myself. I ran away from the public life. I could have been public. I was a prince.
It could also be, I enjoy being nobody.
I enjoy being nobody. That's exactly right.
So what's happening is what we see is that through this story, that the revelation is no longer exclusive. Because in the past, it was this is the God of Abraham. This is the God of Isaac. This is the God of Jacob.
Now the whole world's going to see him.
I'm basically, a non-Israelite. I don't know who I am.
Now, God's changing because God's now going to become public. And he wants Moses to come with him. Yeah. And Moses doesn't want this because Moses doesn't want to become public.
But that's one story. The other story is the idea that revelation is no longer exclusive to holy people.
Yeah.
And so this random guy who doesn't even know he's Jewish now has that.
Yeah.
So now where the ego has been tamed.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole slave story. Now we see the elevation of,
of
the ego.
He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. Doesn't have a point of view, knows not where he's going to.
And you're actually
that was from the great John Lennon commentary to the Bible.
Yeah, and God comes and says, you actually are somebody because of me.
Yeah, and God has to coax him. It's wonderful that God has the patience to coax him.
Well, it's because he doesn't have a good
Because God's God. God can say, do it or I'll kill you. I mean, it doesn't do that. He says, I'll give you help. I'll give you a stick that turns into a snake. I got your brother coming, right? He's a prince of Midian. He's a very interesting character. But now he's going public. And when God steps on the stage of history, and the Bible's imagination is, what would it be like if God stepped on the stage of history? I mean, what would that look like? Next week. See you. Take care. All right, really going to miss you, Bobby. You take care. If you decide to go, you go. We'll love you. We'll come visit you.
I'm in turmoil.
I know.